Hi, everybody. I'm Jake Smith from Boardwalk Potatoes. I want to tell you about a trip I made today to our nation's capital, to Washington, D.C. It's about a 2.5 hour drive from my home. My wife and I had some personal business. We went there today. And I just finished writing a monologue for it for my radio show, which will air tomorrow morning at 9:35 Eastern Time. That's the 3rd of September, 2 months to the election. But I want to tell you about what I saw in Washington, D.C. today. It was very disturbing. You know, we look at the footage on the evening news and we see the rioting and the looting and we see all the things that are going on, and it makes us angry. But in very similar fashion to the way it was in 1968, and I remember 1968 very clearly. Every night I would watch on the evening news the rioting and the looting and the things that went on and the violence. But there was something missing. I never really experienced that. I lived in the suburbs, so I was never involved in any of the violence going back to 1968, to that year of upheaval in this country, that election year of 1968. And this year, obviously, I have not seen any of it. I've stayed pretty far away and pretty safe in my suburban home. But going to Washington, D.C. today, our nation's capital, was really an eye-opener. What I saw was Black Lives Matter, a Marxist insurgent group. These are communists trying to take over our country, my friends. They are clearly entrenched in our nation's capital. I saw many businesses boarded up. Those businesses who were not boarded up had signs in their windows which said either Black-owned business or Black Lives Matter. Now, obviously, they're trying to protect their business from being targeted if and when there is additional violence. But it sort of reminds me, especially for the white-owned businesses that have nothing on the glass, there's nothing that says that, you know, they belong to Black Lives Matter or support Black Lives Matter. It reminds me a great deal of what happened back in the late 1930s in Nazi Germany, when Jewish-owned businesses were targeted because they were owned by Jews. Now, earlier this year, I wrote a monologue for my radio program about business owners who were supporters of President Trump and why they were being targeted for boycotting, for canceling, you know, the whole cancel culture that we have in this country. This is something that's happening right now, but it's happening in our nation's capital. Our nation's capital is something we need to protect. I saw a large building which is obviously holding a large group of Black Lives Matter supporters. There's a big sign across the top, Black Lives Matters. And then there are those pop-up tents on the ground around that building with people in it who are obviously working to support and coordinate activities that Black Lives Matters participate in. No police in sight. My friends, this is very serious stuff. This is dangerous to this republic. This is our nation's capital. And I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. In our history, War of 1812, did we not try to at least save Washington, D.C. and fight for Washington, D.C.? Yes, the British torched it. I understand that. But did we not try to save Washington? Did we not try to save Washington during our first Civil War? Why is the Department of Homeland Security spending so much time patting down and strip searching 85-year-old grandmas at your area airports? And Homeland Security is not involved in trying to take out insurgent groups in our nation's capital, which are planning the overthrow of our government. Now, I know I sound like a raving maniac, but I saw this with my own eyes today, my friends. This is nothing to play around with. This is every bit as serious as any threat this nation has ever faced internally. These are domestic terrorists. Where is the Department of Homeland Security? We were told back in 2001 that we needed to create this massive bureaucracy, the Department of Homeland Security. Their job was to prevent terror attacks on the homeland, whether they be foreign terrorists or domestic terrorists. We were told for years that the real threat to this country was not from international terrorism, but from domestic terrorism. If that's the case, If domestic terror has been the threat for almost 20 years now, and our government's been very consistent in saying that it has, what have they been doing? Where's all the planning to thwart these domestic terror attacks? My friends, these terror attacks are happening right now. That's what's happening in our cities. And now our nation's capital, the representative part of our government, Washington, D.C., is under attack. It's under siege by communist insurgents masquerading as those who are fighting for racial equality in this country. We must insist that President Trump take the necessary steps now to thwart this insurgency. It is critical to the survival of this nation. I'm sorry to sound like a lunatic, and if I do, my apologies to you, but what I saw with my own eyes today has scared the living daylights out of me. I have never before seen the conditions, and I lived through 9/11, and I was at ground zero after the attacks because I worked at one of those buildings. What I saw today, the threat to this nation that I saw today, scared the living daylights out of me. Now, come this weekend, Bill Colley and I, my partner in Boardwalk Potatoes, will be joining us for another podcast. Look forward to that. But again, if you have any concern about what's happening in our country right now, focus your attention on our nation's capital. It's under attack. And they, when I say they, I mean those communist insurgents masquerading as those who are fighting for racial equality. They are planning other attacks right out in the open. They're doing it. Oh, by the way, all those sales trucks that you see all over Washington selling Trump hats and Trump flags and President Trump memorabilia, gone. Replaced by Black Lives Matter sales, tents, vehicles, people all over the place selling Black Lives Matter flags, shirts, you name it. Black Lives Matter merchandise is there. President Trump's merchandise, well, they may have moved to a safer spot. Can you blame them? My friends, I hope that you will take heed of my advice from my trip today to our nation's capital. Yeah, we call it the swamp, and we kid around about how corrupt it is. And it is, obviously. It is a swamp. It is corrupt. But it is still our nation's capital, and it must be defended. Thank you for watching this podcast, this latest Boardwalk Potatoes podcast. Bill Colley and I will be seeing you sometime this weekend. Have a great day.